My name is Stryfe. You think you know what this story is about? A shooting, a kidnapping, the X-Men turned against each other. Heroes fighting heroes while the real enemy waits. That is the surface of it. The real story is about parents who abandoned their son, and what that son became, and what he made them pay. Every person in this story believed they were the hero of their own story. They were all wrong. I was not a villain. I was owed. This is X-Cutioner's song, the crossover that broke the X-Men from the inside.
I was in the crowd. Professor Xavier had been invited by Lila Cheney to speak at the One World Harmony concert in Central Park, a free event, a public statement about coexistence in the middle of a city that had difficulty tolerating its own divisions, let alone the mutant kind. I understood the symbolic logic of the choice. I also understood that an open-air venue with 40,000 civilians is fundamentally incompatible with close protection security. I flagged it. The X-Men proceeded anyway. The professor walked to the podium, and Cable shot him.
We stand at a crossroads, not as humans or mutants, but as one people. Fear has divided us for too long.
But I have seen a better future, one where we choose understanding over hatred, and that future begins with us.
A figure in Cable's distinctive armor stepped from the stage scaffold, deliberate, unhurried, completely visible, as if this were intended to be witnessed, and fired a single shot. Xavier fell forward from the podium. I was across the crowd and to the stage in under 4 seconds. It was not enough. The shooter was already gone. Simultaneously, at Harry's hideaway in Salem Center, the Horsemen of Apocalypse moved. A bar the X-Men had frequented long enough that the name had become part of their unofficial geography. Scott and Jean were there, civilians in a civilian space, with no reason to believe the night was anything other than what it appeared to be.
Jean, look out!
Good lord! Caliban?
War and famine hit Iceman and Colossus directly, not to destroy them, but to hold them, to occupy 2 capable X-Men for 90 seconds, while Caliban, once a friend, now death, reshaped by Apocalypse into something unrecognizable, found Cyclops and Jean Grey. Iceman and Colossus could not prevent it. The Horsemen delivered their captives to someone they believed was Apocalypse. It was not Apocalypse. It was Sinister, wearing Apocalypse image, operating his network, having subverted the Horsemen without their knowledge. He received Scott and Jean from their captors, transferred them to Stryfe, and accepted in return a sealed metallic canister containing what he was told was a comprehensive record of Summer's family genetic material spanning past and future.
I have a piece of the future, which will change mutant kind forever.
Xavier arrived at the hospital. The round was identified. A techno-organic virus, the same infection that had nearly killed the infant Nathan Summers years before, delivered at the molecular level directly into the professor's nervous system. The Beast and Moira McTaggart began working immediately. The virus continued spreading, and I had one piece of information I was completely certain of. I had seen Cable shoot Professor Xavier. The future I had traveled from had been shaped by Cable's legend for as long as I could remember. I had grown up inside the conflict that legend produced. I had arrived in the past carrying a file on Cable that included, among other data points, the fact that he was capable of this. I was wrong about that. It took me longer than I would have liked to accept it.
Temporal displacement complete. Welcome back to the 20th century, Nathan. You have been in the future for 26 days.
Professor, fill me in on what's been happening. I learned about the shooting from a television. I had been running a temporal operation. The details remain classified for reasons still operational. I won't itemize them. I returned to the present, found every news channel running the same story. The assassination attempt on Charles Xavier. And the image they kept repeating was my face. I knew immediately who had done it. We look identical. I had learned this only recently. The knowledge still felt unstable, like a new structural element I hadn't finished stress testing. The figure in that footage was Stryfe. He had used my face as the most visible possible instrument against the one institution on this earth I would never willingly harm. I went to Department H, Canadian government. They had intelligence files on Stryfe's connection to the Mutant Liberation Front, his operational patterns, enough to start distinguishing between his methods and mine for anyone looking for the distinction. Wolverine had the same idea.
Cable's here.
I don't suppose you two could give me 5 minutes in there?
Murderer!
Wolverine, I did not shoot Xavier. He looked at me for a long moment and made his assessment. Bishop was harder. He had been in that crowd. He had watched what he was completely certain was me fire the shot. The future he had come from had spent decades processing Cable's legend, and that legend had left room for this. He had arrived in the past already carrying a version of me that included this possibility. I cannot blame him for that.
I saw you, murderer. Confess before I take your head.
You're wrong, Bishop. We came to an arrangement. I would show them everything. They would give me the opportunity to prove the truth before acting on their certainty. On Grey Malkin, I explained the architecture of it. Both Stryfe and I are from the future. That is not a simple statement. It is the entire foundation of what follows. The infant Nathan Summers was infected with a techno-organic virus by Apocalypse. It would have killed him within weeks. The only chance at survival was the future, where technology existed to slow the progression. A woman came. She was Mother Ascani, Rachel Summers, from a timeline the rest of us would not live to see. She promised the child would survive. His father let him go. That child became me, Nathan Summers. At least, that is what I have always believed, and it is who I have always been. The virus that was supposed to kill me became my architecture instead. But, in the future the Ascani brought me to, they feared I might not survive. The virus was aggressive, the outcome uncertain, and so they created a contingency. A copy of the infant, identical in every way, kept in reserve against the possibility that the original would not make it. A backup that was never supposed to become a person. Apocalypse found it. He took the child from the Ascani, named it Stryfe, raised it as his heir, groomed as a vessel for Apocalypse's consciousness when the time came to transfer. A throne prepared for a tenant who never intended to be permanent. He grew up believing he was the real Nathan Summers, that I was the copy, the imposter, the theft of an identity that had been his from birth. That what had been done to him, weaponized, lied to, discarded when the use proved insufficient, had been done because of me. He came back to the past to make everyone responsible for his life answer for it. All of it. Put out the cigarette, Logan.
Don't think so, bub.
Flammable, carcinogenic material in use. Extinguishing procedure activated.
I presented myself at the Xavier Mansion at a time I calculated would produce maximum receptivity. The X-Men were occupied, exhausted, and frightened. 3 conditions that make people unusually willing to accept information, provided it is delivered with appropriate authority. I walked to their door and told them they were hunting the wrong person. Stryfe had shot Xavier, not Cable. I allowed them a moment to process this. Before any impression of altruism takes root, let me be precise about motivations, because I find imprecision in these matters professionally embarrassing. Stryfe was no longer operationally useful to me. He had served a specific function in my design: the assassination, the cascade of distrust between the X-teams, the convergence of 3 separate teams onto a single crisis point. That function was complete. Redirecting the X-Men toward Stryfe had the additional advantage of pointing them away from my own involvement in the kidnapping. The canister was the point of the exercise. Everything else was architecture. The canister was not empty. I had been informed it contained Summers family genetic material, a comprehensive record spanning past and future generations. The precise data I had spent decades positioning to acquire. What it actually contained was a virus. The legacy virus, engineered at a molecular level beyond anything I had encountered before or since. Targeting mutant genetics specifically. Invisible until it wasn't. Stryfe had spent considerable effort designing something that would spread quietly, kill slowly, and leave no mechanism for cure that I could immediately identify. He gave me a gift I had no way to refuse. In a container, I had every reason to accept. I have found this, on reflection, to be the single most elegant piece of tactical cruelty I have encountered in my considerable professional lifetime. It said nothing I could disagree with about my own methods. The United X-teams performed adequately against the Mutant Liberation Front. The MLF's membership is serviceable, but not exceptional. They function best as a distraction, which is precisely the function Stryfe had designed them for. They were neutralized. Stryfe and his automaton Zero were not present. Rogue was blinded by a heat discharge from an operative named Strobe. She recovered within weeks. In Egypt, the more instructive events were occurring. Apocalypse had been prematurely extracted from a regeneration cycle. His minions, the Dark Riders, that particular collection of social Darwinist aesthetes, had pulled him from stasis to inform him that the X-Men had been attacked in his name. He was operating at perhaps 30% of his normal capacity. Stryfe found him in that condition. What Stryfe intended as righteous reckoning, Apocalypse had taken him from the Ascani, raised him as an instrument, and discarded him when the instrument proved insufficient, proceeded as planned. Apocalypse, being Apocalypse, offered no understanding of what had been done to a child in his name.
The devil has come, Apocalypse. The devil to come must pay his due to the devil who made him. Pay me, Master of Time, and let your death be my coin of exchange.
I owe you nothing, Stryfe.
You owe me everything that's gone wrong with my life. A child, alone in silence, in darkness, with no name, no future. Every scar I carry, every ounce of pain was shaped by you, Apocalypse. You didn't create a vessel. You created your reckoning.
He survived the encounter. Barely. The Dark Riders, true to their foundational philosophy, strength is the only legitimate authority, transferred their allegiance to Stryfe on the spot. Apocalypse escaped and made his way to the one group of people who had consistently and inexplicably helped him survive his own worst decisions. He offered to help cure Xavier in exchange for sanctuary. A techno-organic virus used as an assassination weapon. It was, after all, the technology he had pioneered on the infant Nathan Summers decades before. He understood its architecture better than anyone alive. He could reverse what Stryfe had done, given access to the patient and sufficient time.
I have sufficiently recovered from the confrontation with Stryfe. We can continue with negotiations.
What makes you think that you are of any use to us?
Because I am the only one who can save your precious Professor Xavier.
The X-Men accepted. I found this decision operationally interesting. Morally, I could not speak to it. Xavier survived.
Observe. I forced the virus to evolve too quickly, beyond its own limits. It devours living matter, yet I drove it into overconsumption. Xavier could no longer sustain it, and when it reached for me, it found something it could not consume.
He never turned out the lights. I don't know why that detail stayed with me. We were on the moon, in chains, but Stryfe never turned out the lights. He wanted us to see him. He wanted us to see his face. When he finally removed the helmet, I felt Scott go very still beside me. Cable's face. Cable's eyes. Cable's architecture, worn by someone who moved through it entirely differently. The same blueprint, occupied by a completely different presence. Colder, older, and carrying something I did not need telepathy to identify. Absolute conviction that he had been wronged. Scott and I had made a choice years before that moment. An infant. A virus with no cure in the present. A woman from a future we couldn't reach, promising us that our son would survive if we let him go. We let him go. I have made peace with that choice in every way that matters. I have had to. Because Cable had arrived in our present as a grown man, scarred by a future we sent him to. And he looked at us with the particular expression of someone who understood the decision completely and had decided not to hold it against us. Stryfe had arrived at the opposite conclusion. He told us everything, methodically. The Ascani, the clone, Apocalypse, Javert, growing up carrying a name that had been given to him by a conqueror who viewed him as furniture. Learning the truth. Learning that the original, the real Nathan, as he understood it, had been raised with parents who loved him, even from a distance, even across time, even in borrowed bodies in a future neither of us had been born to. He had not. He had been taken from the only people who had created him with any care, handed to a tyrant as a potential vessel, and discarded the moment he proved unsuitable. Raised to serve a purpose he was never told about by a man who felt nothing about any of it. He wanted us to understand what that felt like. I was working the entire time he spoke. Stryfe had blocked my telepathy in layers. But he was a telepath blocking a telepath. There are angles he could not anticipate. I found a narrow channel and pushed everything I had through it. our location, the layout, the energy signature of our restraints. I didn't know if anyone received it. I kept pushing.
Jean got the signal through. Archangel and Psylocke arrived first. I will not reconstruct the tactical sequence in detail. The restraints came down, Stryfe's position was compromised, and for approximately 30 seconds, the advantage had shifted. 30 seconds is enough. Then Cable came through. I have seen Nathan fight, in his own time and ours. I have watched him operate under conditions that would end most soldiers. What I had not seen, until that room, on the moon, standing 6 feet from the person who shared his face, was what he looked like when the target was person. They looked identical. Same face, same architecture, same genetics, wearing entirely different histories. Cable and Stryfe had the same origin, the same parents, the same blood. One had been sent to a future with love behind the decision, however impossible the circumstances. The other had been taken to the same future by a tyrant who viewed him as a contingency, raised without context, discarded without ceremony. One of them stood in that room, fighting to protect the people who had made that choice. The other stood there demanding they acknowledge what the choice had cost. Both of them, in different ways, were right. I did not have the luxury of sitting with them.
The time vortex opened. I don't know the precise mechanics of how it formed. Jean has a better technical understanding of what Stryfe had constructed. What I observed was that the two of them, Cable and Stryfe, were at its edge when it began pulling.
Stay close inside the telekinetic shield. It will protect us.
I have to put an end to Stryfe, and an end to me. Summers, grab this and hit the button when I say so.
Cable, no!
Summers, do it now!
I can't do it!
Summers, for all of our sakes, do it! Please!
And then there was nothing where my son had been standing. Jean reached the edge first. I was half a second behind her. There was no decision to make. The vortex closed before either of us could reach it. Jean's hand was on my arm. I was aware of that. We stood at the edge of where they had been for longer than was tactically necessary.
Xavier was alive when we returned.
Apocalypse had stabilized the techno-organic progression and disappeared before anyone thought to determine the terms of his departure. Beast described him as having been professionally cooperative. I did not find this comforting. The canister Sinister had received from Stryfe was identified, not Summers' family genetic material. A virus, engineered to target mutant biology specifically. Stryfe's final communication to a man who had manipulated the entire architecture of his life from a distance, and to a world that had never considered what it owed the people it had discarded. We named it the Legacy Virus. We did not know yet what naming it would mean. Cable returned. Weeks later, alive, carrying something in his expression I recognized but did not name. The time vortex had not killed him. Stryfe's consciousness had followed him out of it, occupying a secondary position in Cable's mind, making him dangerous in ways that were difficult to diagnose and harder to address. He survived that as well. I don't know what he thought of what had happened on the moon. He was not a man who explained himself unless the explanation served a purpose. I have never asked him directly. I didn't know what I would say to the answer.
X-Cutioner's song ended without resolution. Xavier survived. Stryfe was gone, consumed by the vortex he had built. And Cyclops and Jean returned from the moon carrying something they could not yet name. The legacy virus had already begun to spread, quietly at first. A mutant here, another there. A biological weapon left behind by a man who had decided that abandonment deserved consequences, and that the world would feel them long after he was gone. It would kill for years. Stryfe had been taken, lied to, discarded, raised to be a vessel for someone else's ambition. Every act of cruelty in X-Cutioner's song, the shooting, the kidnapping, the virus, traced back in a clean, unbroken line to that original wound. He was not sympathetic. He was comprehensible. And those two things are not the same.